Greetings, mortals. I am Natus, the ruler of the underworld, and today I'm bringing you another Inmate of Hell video. And today is gonna be a video on Disaster Thrower from Ragna Crimson, or Disscusing in the manga. But the wiki states it's Disaster Thrower, and I do think there is some translated piece of work from directly from the author where he does just refer to him as Disaster Thrower. So. And I think in the anime they also do like a weird sort of between where they do have him is Disaster Thrower and DCS Choice kind of together. But regardless, I'm just gonna refer to him as Disaster Thrower because it's also kind of funny that the guy he's like the one character who has such an uncreative name, even in anime, to a point it's literally just a statement of what he does, which is Disaster Thrower, aka he creates tornadoes, which are considered natural disasters, and yeah, you get my drift. So yeah, anyways, some of you might be asking why am I making a video of Disaster Thrower from Ragna Crimson, of all Ragna Crimson villains, especially since, you know, we have since we have a lot of other way more fleshed out characters than him. We have Ultimatia, we have Ultin Conway, we have Ultazora, if you want to count Crimson as well. We have all of these guys and a few others that I am going to eventually come to discussing. So why Disaster Thrower? And simply put, I want to discuss it because, one, I felt like discussing the villain with wind powers, because I want to kind of, making the wind elemental villains a bit more popular, so I figured to start talking about one would help. And two, I feel like that from the villains to discuss from Ragna Crimson, and I'll mainly focus on the villains that have appeared in anime and manga, because more people are gonna know about villains from anime than villains from the manga, is because he's kind of we know stuff about him, but we don't know too much stuff about him, so there isn't really, so I think it would be like a good beginning before we get to the more complicated and more interesting ones. You know, it's kind of like talking about Loopy first from the Espada before you get to the actual like badass Espada members. Although to be fair, Zumai would probably be also a good example, but whatever. We'll start talking about Disaster Thrower because I want to talk about the guy, and let's get the riffraff out of the way quickly because the other ones are far more interesting, and also I want to collect the volumes for the other ones, and for Tarotaksha and Ultazora, I'll need the volume of Ultazora, and Volticom has his own volume, which kind of leaves me to need to use Disaster Thrower and Borgis, and yeah, and I already have the Matia's volume, so that's not an issue, but Disaster Thrower is the one that actually would require. Nebulum is its own thing, but I'll see, but I'm also not here to talk about Nebulum. So I think that would be a good way to just start with Disaster Thrower. And I think we do know enough about him and a few fun information behind the scenes that will definitely, make it for an interesting video. So let's start talking about the Disaster Thrower's history in Ragna Crimson, namely on, timeline, all that type of stuff, and try to explain a way that makes sense. So, now, the thing about Disaster Thrower is that, like a lot of others, the members of the Winged Bloodline who don't deserve their own videos, he doesn't really have much of a past or statements about his history to discuss. The most I could really gather is that he was probably more in the middle in terms of when he joined, since, it's pretty definitive the Ultimatia of Ultin Conway and Borgis were the first three in the new generation of Winged Bloodline, and it's pretty definitive that Grim Velten, Nebulum, and the other 13 seats were all the final ones that joined, so I would say Disaster Thrower is somewhere in the middle. I want to say that he joined after Tarotaksha and Ultazora, since I feel like Ultazora and Tarotaksha joined at the beginning stages of the Winged Bloodline's new generation. So I would say after Ultazora and Tarotaksha, but before Donea and Tailgraph, or whatever, the gluttonous dragon, the guy who appeared in the second episode, who got killed, but who was just background noise when Ragnar wanted to join up with Crimson. So I would assume that's where he joined, and took him 2 months. Yeah, 2 months. It's kind of confusing because Ultimate got, I think, 2 days. Well, Disaster Throw got 2 months, but because he turned into a fully fledged dragon in 2 months, which shows his talent and his power. In general, like the way that it's explained is that the shorter it takes for a dragonized, unmature dragon to mature, the stronger they are going to be. Oh, so, like, if you're only maturing for, let's say, 10 months, you are considered a more talented and gonna be considered stronger than, let's say, someone who need a couple of years to mature. It's the reason why Nebulum is viewed as such a genius, such a talent, because he matured basically instantly. I imagine it was literally like just giving the blood, just transform into his hybrid state, or whatever you want to call those unmatured forms, and then immediately just went into his human form. I imagine there was like a second or two, because I thought it was like just sprout horns out of his hat. But regardless, Disaster Thrower took 2 months to fully mature, and that's the reason why he was viewed so powerful. And unlike Ultazora, who's while he's commented to have been, or like Ultazora seems to be like the third who matured the quickest, since I think it only took him 4 months. He is not as powerful, not exactly the best example of uh, how quickly you mature equals your power, because I think Ultazora is behind Tartactra in terms of hierarchy, even though Tartactra is there to have no talent and is self-admitted to be talentless. So Disaster Thrower is a better example, with him being the second, took the longest to mature, and he's the third in the bloodline. So yeah, he has an insane amount of power. Amount of power that we never are going to see, which is kind of viewed, which I find very funny, because even the creator of the story has, yeah, he is very powerful, but unfortunately, his power did not help with what we needed for the story. So yeah. But anyways, after he joined, and it took only 2 months, and I'm not certain how exactly the whole process about ranking goes when you mature very quickly. I imagine that you probably, there is a period when you're the lowest seed, but then if you show off a lot, you get boosted up into higher seeds quickly. Like, you have to prove that you are insanely powerful for maturing so quickly, kind of deal. Because I mean, Nebula it was also put high quickly, but I don't think Nebulum is like. Is that not the fourth seed during the beginning of the story? I think it might have been, actually. Now that I think about it, but yeah, I think Nebulum was the fourth seed, but he should have been like the second seed. But Volticama and Disaster Thrower were both ahead of him, which to be fair, that could be said experience, but regardless. Disaster Thrower and got promoted to third seed probably quickly, and yeah. Then now we deal with two timelines here, but basically let's just go over the future quickly. Disaster Thrower was with every other the Winged Bloodline member when they fought an older version of Ragnar. They defeated him. I'm assuming that he did a good number of hits because of cuts over Ragnar's body, but it was meaningless. And then they were discussing how they should kill Ragnar because he was still, standing. So it was like fair game about who could kill him, with Disaster Thrower just not really giving a shit, because that's kind of his thing. He doesn't really give a shit of stuff that don't really matter to him. So says the wind. So yeah, he's kind of more passive on game member when it comes to that. It isn't until Ultimatia shows up and states that the reason why Ragnar survived is probably because God wants him to join the bloodline, which he doesn't protest. He doesn't even question the decision or anything. Like, the only commentary he does make is that he's kind of ashamed of being a human at some point. Be like, to think how was so ignorant as well. Oh, what low is like, what an idiot the other species, or something like that. You gotta learn that Disaster Thrower likes to call people idiots, even though he himself is a giant idiot. Even like often not so much of an idiot he is, especially when it comes to action material. So yeah, Disaster Thrower is kind of just there. Then Ragnar refuses to become member of the Bloodline, so he pushes Ultimatia away to go stab himself, and At that point, Disaster Throw does actually want to throw the attack at Ragnar to, I guess, cut him in pieces. Like, I'm not entirely sure what would have happened if he stopped, if he, cut the Ragnar before he would be able to reach it. Would he have just died from that, or would that blood just fully act, fully engulf Ragnar and become a dragon? Well, it doesn't really matter because Molten Conway stopped Disaster Thrower from attacking, and yeah, after Ragnar is dealt with, or at least they think Ragnar is dead, Choice is just like kind of angry that, kind of pissy that Volton Conway, hold his arm so tightly. I was a bit annoyed by that, which, funny enough, we actually do get a bit of a power scaling for Walton Conway and Disaster Thrower, and I'll get into it later. But right now, that's all we know is that Disaster Thrower is not cannot really do anything against Walton Conway. Like, despite him being right below him, it's not fair. Like, it's not saying that there's a too big of a gap of power. How Volton Conway literally states that all of the Wing bloodline after, well, even with Ultimata, let's be honest, ourselves, probably can't beat him. Like, Ultimata would be heavily needed to beat him, but regardless, everyone below Ultimata work together are not stronger than him. So, yeah, and in this, as a throw, he kind of agrees with that. As then, after they just decide to leave, Ultimati asks Disaster Thrower to help them carry them all to their place because a few of the members are not really that good when it comes to flying. And he does, and he's kind of embarrassed, which, considering what we learn about his personality when it comes towards women in the beginning of in the current timeline, is actually a bit ironic, but I'll get into it in the personality section. Regardless, he gets very embarrassed, and then uses his wing to have them all fly away. And then it's stated that he and the rest of the winged bloodline got slaughtered by Ragnar a couple of years in the future, and that's about it for the winged bloodline in that timeline. Until we have the whole beginning of the story where future Ragnar, power and mind and personality and all that kind of stuff travels to current Ragnar, and they kind of fuse into one being. Where in this new timeline, the main timeline, as we call it now, he's the main enemy, or the enemy that's used to show us Crimson's intelligence, the power level that Ragnar's silver Reynards have, and just to establish these type of stuff, since this is the second volume's villain, basically. So we explained that he was sent to one of the border cities or villages, whatever we call them, to basically prevent people from entering, leaving, and to interfering. So one of those villages that he did in the beginning of his attacks, he was successful in his destruction. Like, no one could really fight against him because he's the third seed for a reason. So he was so he was slaughtering everyone except for women because we learned that Ultima told him that he needs to stay by in that area, which just means that he's just sort of wasting time and waiting for new orders and probably going into hiding after like the sun rose. But before that, he was just kind of waiting at dark. So he was just sort of collecting women, doing his rampage, so he could spend his time cutting them all over their bodies until they died. Which I think in the manga it's shown that the only thing that was left of those women were like their hats and a bit of their neck area. So yeah, he's one sadistic, sick bastard. So, and anyways, after that, the Crimson's party shows up where they start attacking him, and he at first just kind of was planning on ignoring them, but then Crimson chirps out and starts insulting him and Ultimatia, which at first he says, "Oh, because I and the Wayne have already forgiven you, but you made fun of our progenitor, so you are now deserving of punishment, you fucking pieces of trash, you idiotic beings." And we also have like this very long rant from him, so which is honestly a really funny thing. The fact that this guy talks for such a long time about how he's like forgiven you by calling you an idiot, but he's angry about the progenitor. So in the manga and the anime, especially even in the English stuff, I would say they got that moment very good and made it very comical. So he decides to strike at them, and at first, the dragon hunters are sending lead bullets at him, infused with Ragnar's silverine, which tricks Disaster Thrower to thinking those are silverine bullets in order to have his guard drop down, which Crimson doesn't state, and then they shoot actual silverine bullets infused with Ragnar's silverine to kind of show us the power gap of normal bullets with silverine with against silverine bullets with Ragnar silverine, and they all hit the tornado. And normal bullets got when they hit the tornado was just sort of like somewhat like blocking the wind. Like it was more like just spurts of small crystals showing up around it, but nothing annoying. It wasn't until like the actual ones where it's actually started to like damage the tornado that he was in, because the way that Disaster Throw seems to his main fighting style seems to just be engulfing herself into a giant wind tornado and just rampaging around. Probably to collect people to torture as well as just, a general destructive nature. So he's kind of hit by that, and that also pisses him off. The fact that we're destroying his connection with the wind, because the thing that he does with his naturally high wind magic is he kind of refers to it as his like connection with the wind, which is just him talking to himself, kind of. And he wants to crush that for that as well, but unfortunately they lead him into like a sort of weird like I want to say a wall, kind of a wall-like structure where that's supposed to be, I don't know if it's entering or some ruin or something, but he goes into that area, but it's infused with silverine from Ragnar, because Ragnar wasn't really in an ability where he could move much, so he was kind of like, okay, after that, take him, because it was like, okay, after you guys are gonna be preparing the spike to impale Disaster Thrower. Before that, put Ragnar to that wall so he can infuse it, and then you go prepare the spike. So when Disaster Thrower got hit into that structure, instead of destroying it, it just kind of he hit it, but was just kind of sent him flying because it destroyed his tornado, because it was already weakened due to the previous silverine bullets, which threw him over it, and then Slime grabbed him and slammed him down to the spikes that was set up beforehand. Which at the beginning, Disaster Force kind of confused me. He was like, "Wait, what happened? I was going to slam at the wall, but I'm on a spike. Wait, I got it's something in the wall, thrown up, and something grabbed me and then spawned me here." But anyways, that angers Disaster Thrower, and he wants to get out, and is, I think, starting to transform, or he's trying to go into his dragon form, but unfortunately, Silver Spike right through his heart, or at least through his chest where the heart is, so he's not able to do much. So he instead uses his wind to cut the floor around them, so they like get. He can do a proper tornado, but he can do enough to a point that he can cut the floor around the spike so they can raise it up a bit so he can tipple over, so he would be able to, everyone would lose balance so he could get all of it a bit so he could pull out the silvering spike. Which he is successful at, and then does try to rip the spike off him, because, all he did was really like remove it and I think break it as well a little bit. But he couldn't exactly but he still had in him. So until he removed it, he couldn't go into his dragon form. And then we have a rant about how he hates and he calls everything stupid, how this is insult. So he is preparing to rip it off, but unfortunately for him, Crimson expected this, so instead Crimson just rove over him while he was picking it up to damage his body, as well as it was already being weakened. Sound and Silverwing weakens their body, and he's under a sun with a giant Silverwing spike through his body. So one of those vehicles driving him would do damage, and then afterwards the other dragon hunters was already starting to shooting at him with silver bullets and then chopping his head off, leaving him to die, and just putting his head on a sword and raising it up to get even more sun, so his head would just burn and be finished. Which I do find the sight of it, his burning hat kind of funny because it kind of looks like a different character when he's burning burned whole. Because like, before he transforms like Ashburger gonna Prince Orpheus, but the way that Disaster Throw usually looks like it's kind of a pretty boy, kind of like a pop star or something. So him in that well in this his hat decapitated being burned, he kind of looks more like a generic 30-something-year-old man. It's kind of a weird, funny little thing, but I imagine it's like more of the fire thing, but whatever. Which actually there's a funny story about this because the creator when he was drawing this was watching I think it was Made in Abyss anime because apparently the writer for uh, Daiki Kobayashi is I think the creator of this is I think the mangaka is the yeah I think Daiki Kobayashi is the writer and the artist for the series was while he's having his break he watches some anime he was watching in episode 10 and apparently he was like there's like the main character was getting caught and her it was the blood that came out was like very gory but then after he finished that then was kind of like wow am I going soft in my old age for being weak to this kind of scenes but then he looked at the way he was in the manga chapters and he saw he was doing the disaster throws decapitation he's like I guess I might just be growing numb so it's kind of like a little funny story, but I think it may. But honestly, I feel like if he was drawing it while watching Made in Abyss, it might have just put him in that kind of mood. If you get my drift, I mean, maybe he was watching something else, but before he was drawing that. But I would not be surprised if he was watching the first couple of episodes of Made in Abyss, made a chapter, and then took a break, watch of the 10th episode for Made in Abyss, and then go back to the drawing board, and he just got subconsciously influenced by that. So yeah, and then that's pretty much the end of Disaster Thrower's story in the current in the manga and the anime. Some mature dragons with his power and his way of speaking appear in the battle between Ultrazor and the Silverine Corpse, but also different characters. They're not really connected to him at all. And yeah, so that's the end for him. Now, with the story point out of the way, let's talk about his design. Like I said, Disaster Throw has a very pretty boy look to him. Like he has like a very pop boy kind of look to him. At least majority of him is because for some reason below his, I want to say torso, but the thing is, a good chunk of his like, a good chunk of his like, well, not thigh region and I think it's actually 5 reasons. It's actually a bit normal, but then you have like the very end of him, which is like very dragon-like armor sort of state. So it's kind of interesting their design. I imagine it was like one of those things where Disaster Four had a very bland design if it was just a normal look. So the artist probably just decided to give him like, okay, let's at least make his lower portion a bit more unique and fancy because otherwise it would just look very generic and not really that appealing. I also imagine that tail was just something he felt like adding, so yeah, he has a very very armor like tail and legs. And in his dragon, and while we have never seen him actually going to his full dragon state, it is actually we do actually have like a very soft side of it. Or the very least, from what I could see, the only panel of him is like what when when Chris was talking about the level gaps between normal these base disaster thrower and his dragonite form. Where we see like we do see a brief glimpse of it, but it's basically like it kind of just looks like a generic dragon. Honestly, it's kind of like a normal dragon head and with multiple wings and kind of a giant bulky form. But that's about it. It's nothing really unique or special to really talk about. It's just generic, like kind of like I said, a generic pretty boy kind of design and just a generic dragon design. So yeah, then let's talk about disaster powers. Was powers which disaster was the thrower is a very obvious wind magic user. He engulfs himself in tornadoes and sends wind blades at uh, people and generally has a lot of magic power because he's it only took him 2 months to fully drag manifest. I do wonder if he has some kind of wind blast type of ability, but Probably not, since I don't really know if saying wind balls from off would be as a factor, but whatever. And it's and yes. Now it's also said that his tornado is actually really fast, and that jeep that Crimson was driving it would and its top speed not be fast enough for base level disaster thrower, but due to disaster thrower's power, it actually is faster. And we do get some good kind of scaling idea for some of the power. Well, if you're a power scaler, you get some idea how powerful disaster throw is, because his because when he's in his dragon form, he can make 8 of those tornadoes, and they are bigger than they were in the fight against Crimson, or fight against Crimson. So about 8 times stronger than what he is, maybe 9 times if you want to split one tornado to all of the other ones, because they would still be bigger than what he used against Crimson. And yeah, we also get a good scale for Volt and Kamo in this, because the author did come out and say that while Disaster Thrower is Disaster Thrower is not weak. In his fully flat dragon mode, Sirius against Volt and Kamo, it would take Volt and Kamo to go into his dragon, not half dragonite state, that like form where he turns like his skin black and his eyes and a few of his marks become yellow, and he gets having a bit of spikes, like not full dragon mode, just that weird form that I'm pretty sure that he actually had before he even became a member of the bloodline. Well, regardless, he can ease about on the same level as that. Although, consider if I could say that it's about the same level as that, it makes me kind of think it's more of a 50-50, maybe even lesser. Like, well, this about makes me think that that Disaster Thrower at his fullest is like 45% of Volten Com is like 45% chance of beating Volten Combo in that state. And that's not even Volten Combo's strongest. I mean, Volten Combo has like 2 more forms before that, and Disaster Thrower is below that. So yeah, when when Volten Combo is set at all the wing line together against him, it's still his victory is 100% true. Like, Disaster Thrower is not a game changer. And honestly, I feel like if Nebula was able to, show off more and was able to develop his powers a little more during the Bloodline, I would not be surprised if Nebula would have surpassed them. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that he didn't surpass them in the original timeline, unless if maybe he did. I think it's about 20 years since the Winged Bloodline defeated Ragna in the original timeline before they got all killed, so maybe Nebula did surpass them in that timeline, it's just that we haven't seen it yet. But yeah, I mean, I could totally imagine like Ragnar saying, "Oh my God, he's even how could never be this stronger?" Even in the original Ragnar's timeline, in after 20 years, he did surpass Disaster the Thrower, but he didn't surpass Volten Kamo yet. He's this powerful. So yeah, I do kind of get the impression that. So yeah, I could obviously grab him surpassing him, but regardless, Disaster Thrower is not the game changer in that fight. So yeah, now let's go into some of his personality and relationship. So Disaster Thrower is is a very arrogant and very idiotic type of character. Despite calling every human idiot, he himself is not very intelligent, because he really should have I mean, he really should have started finding weird how as soon as those silverine bullets started having those giant effects, he should have already been like, wait a minute, if you guys use silverine bullets and they had no effect, but now you're using silverine bullets again, and it has this effect. Wait a minute, why would these two silverine bullets have different effects unless if one was weaker than the other ones? But there is no difference in silverine bullets themselves. So where is the difference? Like, that should have been his red flag as well as the fact that the sun coming out should have also told him yeah, probably shouldn't go into battle against them when the sun is rising. Like, Vulcan coming Disaster Thrower really shouldn't have been doing any of that, and or at least go full power quickly so he could be able to change the whole events quickly, but he didn't. So yeah, that And now, like I was saying throughout the video, Disaster Thrower is also like a very sadistic individual because his favorite thing, or the is like, or how he spends time is collecting women and slowly killing them because he's likes hearing them scream. So he's a very big sadist kind of deal. It has me kind of wonder if the author is having using Disaster Thrower as a reference to someone that he met at some point, like maybe a playboy in his school or something. Because even the writer seems to kind of not really dislike, but kind of has like this jokey kind of this idiot kind of character. Because like in his sort of extra in the volume, he's called him the wind scrub. And was like, oh, Disaster Thrower is stronger because it would take a minute for Ragnar to beat him. Actually, no, he's a scrub. Or then later he had like Crimson's in a Twitter or something posting about Crimson's rankings of threats from the Winged Bloodline, and he had Disaster Thrower on the fifth. But then I think he could have been lower, but he actually is legitimately powerful, so he would have so he had them in the fifth, which means that Donea, Nebula, maybe Borges could have all been put above him if he was a bit weaker than his full power serious mode being about on the same level as Voltec Kamui's Dragonized form, semi-Dragonized form. So honestly, I would consider that more hybrid form, but I think it's actually weakened the hybrid form. But whatever, which I just find really hilarious. That Riot does seem to kind of have a jokey dislike towards him, and yeah, uh, but yeah, anyways, he's very sadistic. But when it comes to Ultimata, he's kind of very embarrassed to talk about it. And he, like, when she asked him to help with with carrying everyone to a different location, he's like, oh yeah, yes, I will do it. So very quickly, the wind can do everything. And then Ultimata is like, tell the wind I thank him. Oh yeah, yes, he'll know. I'll show him know. So even he's kind of losing it. Which Bogus has to say, is he ever going to be able to talk to the progenitor face to face like everyone else can? And also that's what makes him kind of cute, the fact that he can talk with her. I guess it's kind of a interesting way to talk about, especially considering how sadistic he was presented to be. You know, it's kind of like it's kind of like an alter, which I don't know if that's supposed to be like a sort of foreshadowing for Ultrazora's character more so than would a joke with Disaster Thrower, but whatever. We'll talk about when we get to the Ultrazora video. So yeah, as a villain, I would say Disaster Thrower is like a 3 out of 10 because actually no 2 out of 10 because like again he's sort of just a showing off of Crimson's intellect and the kind of powers or levels of characters as well as sort of showing us how these fights will what is everything that's gonna be involved in a fight. Characters' power levels, the equipment they're gonna using, the advantages and disadvantages, and a lot of that type of stuff. So I think that's more what Disaster Thrower is supposed to represent than anything else. And yeah, he was decent, but he was nothing special since when it comes to these types of events, they're not gonna stand out enough to really break the ceiling. Like even some other antagonists, like Farah from Sim from Gear, was at least fun and not more of a style than he did. But whatever. Now, anyways, I hope you like this video. I hope you leave a like. You can tell me what you think of Disaster Thrower from Ragna Crimson. Also, leave in the comments if there's any villains you would like me to discuss in the future. And anyways, with that said, I can wait to see all of you mortals next time. Goodbye.